Hello, everyone. This is Tom Fox back for another episode, and I'm absolutely thrilled today to have with me Jackson Calame. I had the opportunity to be on Jackson's podcast, Vision Pros Live, and he asked him if he would come on one of our this pod, and he graciously agreed to do so. Jackson, first of all, welcome to the podcast.
Woo! My honor to be here, Tom. This is gonna be awesome.
You have a really interesting story. I thought I might maybe start off by asking if you could tell us about your professional background and then how you evolved to both sort of a leadership or that type of professional consulting, and of course, how did you get into podcasting?
Oh my goodness, that convoluted story. 0.33 GPA. Do I start there, or do I start from my trip in Panama last week?
You and
Everything in between. I help entrepreneurs get out of their own way. That's really a big piece. And obviously, entrepreneurs who are already at the stage where they want to get out of their own way. We call this one big word that never gets talked about on stage, and that's infrastructure. We got a tagline at First Class Business. The tagline is, "Hey, Batman, let us be your Alfred." Those of you who remember, Alfred was the butler, but he represented dozens of people who helped pull the house together. Can you imagine Batman trying to cook dinner, trying to answer the phone, trying to pay invoices, trying to do the dishes, all while the bat signal's going off? That's what most of us as entrepreneurs are constantly trying to do, rather than go out there and help the world with the service or the product that we know that we need to get out to the world. So we come in and represent that back office of both what Alfred does in the home and what Mr. Fox does to scale Wayne Enterprises. We want to provide that same level of strength, infrastructure, and stability to entrepreneurship in the world.
so tell us about the pod.
Vision Pros. Vision Pros is a place to actually get to know you guys and interview you. We interview visionary leaders about how they're helping in the world. And so that could be somebody who's got a local dentist who's looking to help make smiles brighter in his community. It could be somebody who's scaling a crowdfunding project globally. But if the service they're providing is providing true value to the market at large, like, we want to know about it. We want to promote it. We want to tell people about what you're up to.
So you have a great phrase that frankly I don't hear people in your vertical talk about, and that's the executive level, but you call it the chief level. Why the chief, and
Hmm.
how do you use that to help have a broader conversation with business leaders?
Well, that's a good question. Again, I think if you haven't read The E Myth, I would recommend at least scanning that book. It's a book I should have read much sooner. Michael Gerber breaks down the reality that trying to do it all by yourself or with one or two people ends up creating a really big mess of an experience for everybody. And you need procedures, you need resources, you need templates, you need to know how things work. You can't just delegate by abdication, meaning you got to kind of know what these systems are like in order to move the needle forward. And those systems, they span across lots of departments. We live in a world where AI and Forbes and Inc. want to oversimplify everything. But the reality is, while some people call themselves a marketer, I'll be the first marketer, quote unquote, to admit that there's no such thing as a marketer. It's called a department. A department contains more than one person. You need that team. So I'm sure there's a successful solopreneur out there, but the ones that I've met, they're usually standing in front of planes they don't own. They usually got sunglasses on, they bought on a credit card they can't pay off. And they're usually taking advantage of people and calling it a virtual assistant relationship. We call VA relationships virtual abuse. They end up over assigning, over delegating tasks to people who are well meaning, but they're scared to lose their job. So they'll put all the work in and the hours in spite of not seeing their family. We have an opportunity to shift all that. And if we do shift to a more abundant mindset and a more abundant process that centers for us around 5 core values, that's love, patience, persistence, consistency, and reliability, then we can provide better services. To me, it starts with making sure that the entrepreneur is not trying to be the chief marketing officer, the chief operations officer, the chief executive officer, and the chief financial officer, the chief technology officer, all in one. It's like, what are we doing to ourselves? Why do we think we have the ability to do all of that?
So when you say the word chief, could that be a Native American chief? Could it be Chief O'Brien walking across Deep Space Nine, keeping the space station working? Or could it be a chief of staff? Or could it perhaps even be the master sergeant of a tank crew who holds the entire crew together because you have a 21-year-old lieutenant who's in charge? Or none of the above? I don't want to confine your definition.
Love it. Well, I love it. And I would say instead of the none of, the add to it. Or it could be capitan, or it could be jefe, it could be gerente, right? So it depends on the language. And the beauty of it is, if we look below the subtext of any given word, any given word we want to define, definitions change based on cultures and they change based on generations as well. Look no further than the word gay. I'm not going to go into that, but we've got 100 years of evolutions related to that specific word. So when it comes to chief, one of my favorite words is the word president. And president means to preside. To preside ultimately means to be a guiding example. Right. So as a chief, you have the same type of role of stewardship, leadership comes to mind. And I'm going to go right back to the core value, what I focus on, which is love. Right? Am I leading with love? Am I meeting people with that superpower? Or am I meeting people in ways that causes more of a disconnect or a fear or a reality where people follow because they have to and they're forced to rather than feeling empowered to contribute and stick around? So chief to me is more all encompassing, and it's one of those dynamics that I'm constantly exploring is okay, I'm now pretty good at leading people in companies of 10 to 15 people. But how do you lead people when you have a company with 1,000 people present or 10,000 present? I don't know that one yet. So if I'm gonna move and scale my business to that level, I need to start incorporating more mentors, which I would also see as chiefs, and say, what can they bring to the table? What can they teach me so that as I strive to scale my business, a mentor who's going to help me value my own balance as a single father of four. I'm not going to sacrifice that in my process of scale. And two, how do I make sure that they know how to help me divide my time amongst the new numbers of people that I'm also supposed to be guiding and helping? What does that look like? I'm not. I'm now at the wise stage. I would say the more wise stage of, you know what, I can't figure this out on my own. I need people to help me along this path, but I need to get out of my own way more often than not.
What do you see as the alignment between leadership behaviors and compliance or ethically and compliance driven cultures?
Tough question. Simple answer. I'm a big fan of the statement. We have a leadership academy, Tom, and at the very end of our leadership academy, the very last segment says, great leaders are also great followers. I'm a big believer in that. I wish I had learned that earlier in life, that if I had wanted to be a truly great leader, I should have, again, found other leaders to follow rather than trying to pioneer my own path. When it comes to compliance, that is certainly not my expertise in any way, shape, or form. So I then need to figure out who on my team has those skill sets. What can we ask ChatGPT about? What do we need to learn here as well? And how would we go over the process of recruiting or bringing somebody in? And what compliance risks are we facing? Do we have an industry that's highly regulated or one that's not? Are we distributing product that has to be approved by the FDA? There's so many layers of that. I think, again, the key is to be humble enough to take a step back and say, I'm not going to pretend I know all of this. I got to find somebody who can guide me on these concepts.
I'm often asked a question along the lines of, what would the 60-year-old Tom tell the 25-year-old Tom? My answer is nothing. I knew everything when I was 25. Nothing I could say to that person. Or to quote Bob Dylan, I've been older then. I'm younger now. I was so much older then. I'm younger now.
Hmm.
So yes, lesson learned. Now, for those listening at home, not watching on YouTube, Jackson's wearing a San Antonio Spurs t-shirt. And the Spurs are, I think, universally recognized with one of the best corporate cultures in the NBA, if not perhaps all of the sports world. And that is not having won a championship now for maybe 10 plus years, but they are still recognized as incredibly well run. So I wanted to maybe use that to springboard into dysfunctional team versus championship team, because even though as the Spurs move through this process they're in now, I think they're moving back towards being one of the great championship teams. So, could you tell us a little bit about what you see as the characteristics of a dysfunctional team? And I should probably say the Houston Rockets, since I was from Houston, versus a high performing championship team, because it's been 30 plus years since the Rockets were in the finals.
There's a phenomenal book on that, and that's The Five Dysfunctions of a Team by Patrick Lencioni. I absolutely love that book. So much so that we created our own flyer for the concepts that show the difference in the symptoms between the two. And I'll share that with you, Tom, so you can put it in the notes for after the show. But this chart basically breaks down for you, starting from the bottom. If you don't have trust established, if there's a lack of trust, you're going to have challenges as a team. That starts with a leader, followed by if you don't engage in conflict, if there's a fear of conflict within your organization, same thing. You're going to really struggle to talk about the things that matter most for growth. Next level up is learning to build, and therefore on the opposite side, the low performance side, you've got a lack of commitment. And then above that, you have an avoidance of accountability. And then at the top, you would then have an inattention to the results. So those levels are already laid out, in my opinion, super, super well by Patrick Lencioni. What we did was in that leadership academy that I told you about, we've added that in. I think it's on day 6 in the program, if I'm not mistaken. So we got 11 days of full leadership training that every single team member has to go through before they're even able to start working on the assignments within our company. We want our people to become tip-top shape leaders. We want to recognize and honor the fact that even if they're great human beings, most of them have never worked in a championship level culture. So if they haven't worked in that before, they have to unlearn a lot of old habits, and then they have to have time to develop and progress in the new habits. And then that book becomes required reading, where they get 3 to 4 hours. I think it's 4 hours total to be able to listen to that book on Audible. And then we give a progress report, a comprehensive analysis questionnaire of what did they learn from the book? What did they get out of it? One of their team leaders then reviews their responses on that. And if they need some time to be guided through the book to understand the details, because it's their first time being in a corporate environment or their first time learning how to work in a business, that's totally okay. I don't want to send people out into the workforce representing first class business that don't understand the value of those concepts, because it's a game changer. So I also am I'm very strong in encouraging all of our clients to also read the book. I don't require it, but it's pretty close to saying, you know what, I really don't want to work with the client unless they've grasped the concepts from that book, because they're going to struggle to keep up with the pace of how we do things if they haven't really dove deep. So I can't give it all to you right now. I wish I could, but Patrick Lencioni does it in about 3 hours.
Let me switch over to how to become a power brand in your market, because I try to talk to corporate professionals about their personal brand and why that's so important in today's market. It's not stay at one company for 20 years. It is a series of opportunities or maybe even projects that might interest you. My daughter changed jobs 5 times in 18 months after she graduated from college. And she more than doubled her salary, showing me that I knew nothing about the current job market. So, how do you help someone become either a corporate power brand or a personal power brand? How do you help someone first understand the concept and then move towards that type of persona?
For sure. I think it goes back to he that has ears, let him hear. He that has eyes, let him see. If somebody goes to firstclassbusiness.io and they see that tagline about Batman and they feel that pain, they're like, man, I don't want to be that. I don't want to do all the things by myself. And they already know that they should come take a look at the program. If somebody feels empowered to want to do all of that, by all means, go for it. Get out there and do it. On the corporate and business side too, I think the other factor is don't let me define for you guys what a power brand means for you. It's an opinion. It's open for your own interpretation. For us on our end, that means that within 45 to 180 days, I want the brands that I work with, whether they're an individual or whether they're a brand that plans to scale globally, I want to make sure we're adding $20,000 in new revenues within that time frame, 45 to 180 days. If we're able to achieve that in new revenues per month, then I would say that brand's onto the races to be one of those market leaders that exist out there. And so while money is not the end goal, it is the vehicle that drives the continued success of an entity and allows an entity to be in a powerful position where you get to choose, am I going to achieve more balance in my life at this point? Or am I going to choose to have more scale? And you know what, if we can accomplish both, I said, let's go for both. But I'm not here to define that vision for the other entrepreneur. Nobody tells Batman who he should be. Nobody told Tim Duncan like what he should do. Greg Popovich just happened to be a phenomenal coach and guide and visionary to help facilitate the type of environment that Tim benefited from and thriving. But at the end of the day, the clients that I work with, they have to be willing to be Tim Duncans. They have to be willing to be Tom Brady's, LeBron James. If they're not showing up with that type of energy, we tend to catch them on it, and that doesn't look too pretty either. Because if you're trying to come into the market inauthentically, I am not the person to work with. You won't enjoy the questions that I ask and the observations that we make. It's not an accusation; it's an observation.
I was really glad you mentioned revenue because sometimes people are reluctant to talk about that. Others, that's all they want to talk about. But you talk about the 8 pillars of sustainable revenue growth. Could you go through those and give us a little insight, perhaps, into each one?
For sure. We'll give another chart. I like visual learning myself. So I got a chart where it shows we've actually shifted them from pillars to layers of a foundation. And that's to honor a great building from Rome called the Pantheon. The Pantheon is over 2,000 years old, and it's still the largest concrete dome on the planet. And I think about legacy, and I think about the idea of stability and infrastructure when I think of that building. And it has 8 pillars across, which is what inspired me to use that particular building. But in reality, the 8 pieces that we focus on, it's the exact order that we build our brands with. It starts with the bottom, which is vision. That's exactly why our podcast exists, Vision Pros Live. We want to understand the vision clearly. If we do not understand the vision clearly, we don't want to be part of it. You might hype me up. You might be able to hype a lot of the market to think about what you're doing and get excited based on dopamine and adrenaline and cortisone and all that. But at the end of the day, there's more to evaluate when it comes to vision than just a feeling. Vision's first layer. Second layer after vision comes culture. We want to make sure that the culture is one in which we would want to be a part of. I want to be around. If I don't want to be in the office environment, if I don't want to work with the leaders that are behind the vision, then I'm not going to last too long in that environment. And that environment's going to continue to have all sorts of turmoil take place. So vision and culture attracts leadership. And when you've got a great company that has amazing leadership in it, now we have something that we can market. Every tire shop on the planet is trying to sell tires to the market. They've got a service, they've got a product they want to sell. There's no differentiating factor between product and service without a great vision, culture, and leadership. But the brilliance of Elon Musk going on stage several years ago and selling a Tesla Model 3 that nobody had ever really driven, and 180,000 people bought a car that they wouldn't get for 2 to 3 years. That's vision. Right? He could be in prison right now had he not fulfilled on it, but he did fulfill on it. And so what did he become? Let's stay away from the politics side of things for the podcast sake today. But in terms of Albert Einstein, Thomas Edison, he gets compared to a lot of the great inventors out there because of what he was able to pull off with that. So vision, culture, leadership, marketing, followed by fulfillment, operations, sales, and support. Back to Tesla and where most people think sales and support comes first. No, it actually comes last. That doesn't mean the leader doesn't.
God, that's a great insight. Actually, I think that would be a great way for us to end this podcast, Jackson.
I love it.
But before we leave, I wanted to ask you, we've talked about a lot of strategies. We've talked about your podcast. We've talked about your business. We've talked about your consulting practice. I was wondering, we're going to link to all those in the show notes, but people like to hear the owner say his sites.
Yeah.
So could you tell us where we would find those and what are your preferred social media platforms?
For sure. Appreciate that, Tom. I'd love to connect with any of you. You're welcome to friend request me on Facebook. That's a very easy way to reach out. Jackson Calame, JacksonCalame. If you're watching, you see it on the screen. VisionProsLive.com. Come and share your vision. You're brand new, you got a new vision, come and share it authentically with us. We'll be excited to support you on that. Oportunidadeslatinas.com. That's opportunities for Latinos. If you speak Spanish, you already caught that. We're always interviewing inspirational Latino stories. I was just in Panama helping the people of Panama in one of the poorest areas of Panama learn job skills, learn how to become what we call digital ambassadors, basically super virtual assistants. It was an awesome week. And firstclassbusiness.io. Firstclassbusiness.io. Once again, I recommend going to Vision Pros first and coming and seeing and getting a feel for who my co-hosts are. One of my favorite things when I'm considering hiring a brand, I want to get to know the people behind the brand, not just the founder. The people are a reflection of the founder, the people, the processes that you go through can give you really solid insight into what might you expect behind the scenes. And I wish more entrepreneurs would dive into that due diligence, check some references, make sure that you're working with the right people before you try to hire them. It can help settle down your expectations and make sure that you're coming in for the right reasons.
Well, Jackson, now we are at the end of our time. This has just been a ton of fun. I greatly look forward to continuing this conversation.
Likewise, Tom, I appreciate you too, man. Thanks for all the value you brought to Vision Pros as well.